Hello everyone, it's Fahed from Audiobookish. I'm joined by Poppy,
Hiya.
and we have a guest today, Sherry Green. Sherry is a bibliophile who teaches by day and reviews books by night. She is an avid user of Audible, Libby, Hoopla, and enjoys nothing better than nice hot beverages, well-narrated audiobooks, and long walks with her dog Hannah. She's a proud member of the Publishing Hopeful group on Facebook and can be found on both Instagram and Twitter at Wryreader. Hello, Sherry. How are you doing today?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you once again for taking the time to join us on the weekend. So let's kind of chat a little bit about you. So you're a librarian at the moment. Is that? Oh, sorry, a teacher at the moment. I see biblio, and I think like library in French. So
Yes.
you're a teacher at the moment. What kind of class are you teaching? Is it teenagers, children, or
I substitute teach
yeah?
through a third party company, but I am currently teaching a classroom of second graders through basically the end of this school year. So they have been fun, but can definitely be a little bit of a handful.
Yeah.
And kind of what's it been like? Is that kind of in class teaching, or are you having to do that over Zoom, or what's the situation where you are at the moment? Is it relatively back to normal, or is it stay away 2 meters away sort of thing going on?
It's been a little touch and go. So we are mostly doing a hybrid model. So we're in school 4 days a week. I'll have one group of kids on Monday, Tuesday, another group Thursday, Friday, and then Wednesdays we all log on virtually. However, this past week we had spring break just recently. So we've all done a full virtual week together so that everyone can make sure that no one's bringing any germs back, hopefully.
That's good. So we kind of got in touch through the Publishing Hopefuls group. So I was just wondering, how are you finding your kind of job hunt in terms of like looking for roles in publishing and that sort of thing? I think both myself and Poppy are quite keen to enter that industry as well. So
Yeah.
just wondering how that was going.
It's definitely been a learning journey trying to figure out, because my degree is not in journalism or it's not an English degree. I actually have a degree in theater, which seems very unrelated. However, it's all storytelling based, is how I'm looking at it, and that's what I want to do for people. I want to help tell stories and share them with others. So I really like helping people edit their work. So I would love to be an editor. But of course, I'd be thrilled with just about any role in the publishing industry at this point. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, I think Poppy, you're quite interested in editorial roles, aren't you?
Yeah, definitely kind of similar to you. I enjoy helping other people tell their stories. I mean, I guess maybe when I was very, very young, the idea of being an author sounded good, but I very quickly went, you know what, no, I want to help other people improve their stories. But also got, interests in some other departments. Audio, definitely. Any role to do with audio would be amazing. And production stuff, bit of rights. But yeah, a bit like you, sort of a foot in the door would be fabulous. But it's kind of interesting because I'm definitely not so inclined to be a marketeer, whereas I know for head that's where you kind of your skills lie.
Yeah, so I like marketing communication slash audiobooks is what I'm interested in. Editorial, kind of like for me, going over the same piece of text over and over and over again. I kind of had enough of that when I was working as a solicitor, kind of revising contracts. So that's not something I'm particularly interested in going back to. So before we kind of get into your like picks for your favorite audiobooks, just want to talk a little bit about your blogging and reviews that you're kind of doing at the moment on Instagram and Twitter. Kind of what, generally speaking, kind of what sort of books do you enjoy reading?
I, over the last couple of years, have really been trying to read an even mix, a variety, but my favorite will probably always be historical fiction. I have attempted to include a little more nonfiction into my rotation in the last year or so as well, which is not usually my bag. I tend to stick to memoirs and historical texts within that particular genre. I'm really not keen on the math and science books, unfortunately.
What kind of historical period is your favourite to read stories from?
Oh, anything pre 1900. There's a lot of World War II era books coming out right now, and I'm like, oh, that sounds kind of cool, but like you put something set it like 100 years earlier than that, and that is absolutely my jam.
So is it kind of things like books by Kate Moss, that kind of thing that you're interested in?
Yes. Yes, I enjoy some of her works. I've also been reading a little more fantasy lately, some YA fantasy, as anyone who checks the Instagram feed will see. I read a couple of them the last month or so. One was The Trickster by Dorothy Windsor, and the second book in the Crowns of Croswald series by D.E. Knight. And those were both really fun reads.
So kind of like YA is something that Poppy's quite interested in as well, isn't it?
Really?
Yeah. I'm a bit picky about it, but I do enjoy it a lot, and certainly, certain ones. It's good. You've got permission to be a bit wackier and, as some people might say, childish. I don't know, just imaginative than adult books, but you still have kind of grown-up themes. Yeah, I've got a lot of favourites that fall under that genre.
So I think that's quite interesting because one of my favourite book podcasts at the moment is Your Own Words, and they're doing a lot of YA fiction on there at the moment. And, you know, you are allowed to go off and kind of explore maybe stranger ideas, but they were also talking about a couple of books where it was originally marketed as a YA fiction novel and then kind of repackaged towards the adult market to kind of maybe make it a little bit more palatable. I think that's also kind of like, oh, is it YA or is that just the marketing? I think that's also quite an interesting area as well.
Yeah.
So audiobooks, we're big fans of them. Obviously over here, kind of how did you first discover audiobooks and what's your favorite method of listening to them? I kind of like to do other things while I'm listening to audiobooks, but Poppy's very much more in favor of kind of like sitting down in a chair and having someone read her a story. So what's your history with audiobooks and how do you like to listen to them?
So I first started really getting into audiobooks while I was working an office job at like a small retail pharmacy chain. I was basically doing a lot of data entry, and I noticed my coworkers had headphones in all the time. My supervisor finally said, "You know what? That's fine as long as you have one earbud out, can hear us, and not while you're on phone duty." So I thought, all right, well, what am I going to listen to? And then I made my way through probably more books than I ever have before that year, which was fun. Definitely made going to work a little more enjoyable than it might have otherwise been.
Yeah, it's a nice way to escape the kind of mind-numbing drudgery of some jobs anyway. So we'd like to hear kind of what your top 5 audiobooks are. So what's kind of like your first choice?
Okay, so first of all, putting together a list of my top 5 was incredibly difficult because I am notoriously bad at favorites. However, I did collect a top 5. I am not ranking them 1 through 5, though.
That's fine. In no particular order.
That's fair. We'll let you off with that.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely, in no particular order. The most recent one that I listened to that I really, really enjoyed was In Spite of Myself by Christopher Plummer. It was his memoir that I saw popping up, I think, on Twitter somewhere shortly after he passed. And of course, that was all over the internet. And I really think memoirs work so well as audiobooks, especially when you have the author narrating. It's such a personal thing to have someone tell you their life story. And this particular one is charming and at times even conspiratorial. It's a lot of fun. I found myself listening in like small chunks while I would walk my dog, and I was prolonging it. I didn't want the one-sided conversation to end.
I'm sure the listeners will be upset with us if we don't ask, what kind of dog is your dog?
Oh, she is a black lab mix. We're not sure with what, but she mostly looks like a black lab, and she's quite old. She will be 13 this August, so she's a cranky old lady.
Awesome.
It's quite interesting what you say about biographies. I don't think I've ever listened to a biography on audiobook. In fact, I've probably not read any biography. So I'm just, I'd be curious to know kind of what draws you to kind of like biographies. And I think it's quite interesting kind of how people have different tastes in what they read.
So I think the first memoir biography that I read was The Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls. and it was an assignment for an AP English class my senior year of high school. And I really fell in love with that book. I even went on to read the one she writes about her grandmother, Half Broke Horses. I'm actually currently in the middle of a reread via audio of that one. And yeah, I think that's how I got hooked on them. I think the trick is finding people that you're interested in the first place. Yeah. A lot of actors, honestly, are most of mine. I just listened to one by Dick Van Dyke the other day. I've got a couple of, I think both of Julie Andrews' memoirs are on my TBR list.
So Matthew McConaughey was on a TV show promoting his autobiography, Green Lights, and that's one that's kind of on my TBL list, if we're going to make it audio, because I think that would be really good. And I totally agree with your point about it's really cool if they can get the actual author to narrate it and have them telling the story. I mentioned in a previous podcast that for Trevor Noah's autobiography, I listened to the preview and decided I actually wanted to read it myself, but that's because I'm so used to him telling me stories through stand-up, and the style was just quite different because I could tell these were words written for the page as opposed to for the performance. And so that's one instance where I kind of it was just a bit too weird for me. But yeah, I think in other situations, things like that, I guess with an actor or another person that I know, then I definitely agree with you. Having them actually speak the story is really cool. I listened to Carrie Fisher's book.
Oh.
Yeah, and that was really cool as well. So she'd done it as a one-woman show, and then she'd written the book from it, and then also recorded the audio, and that was awesome because it was basically like I had tickets to a never-ending version of the show. So yeah, that was really cool.
I can imagine.
So the Christopher Plummer biography, what were kind of the standout moments for you through like the book? Was it the way that he narrated it, or was there any particular moments in his life that kind of struck a chord with you?
There are quite a few standout moments for sure. In his memoir, he had managed to get into quite a lot of shenanigans, as one can imagine. But it was mostly his style of narration. It was very conversational. Like I said, conspiratorial is probably the best word I can think of. It was like you were sharing a secret with him. And that was really appealing to me.
So it's just like him kind of, you're at a bar with him and he's kind of sharing some anecdotes with you rather than lecturing at you.
Absolutely.
That's fascinating. What's the next one on your list?
The next one on my list, I will take a tangent off of the Carrie Fisher one.
Oh, okay. That was wishful drinking, by the way.
Okay, I'm going to add that to my TBR list. Girls and Boys by Dennis Kelly. It was also written as a play, and it's performed as a one-woman monologue by Carey Mulligan. And the material is really tough in regards of subject matter, but the performance is like visceral. My jaw dropped a couple of times throughout the performance, and it's not a particularly long one either. As you can imagine, if it was originally written for the stage, obviously people are not going to sit there for 5 hours or more. But it was incredibly impactful, and it's one that immediately stuck in my mind. You said top 5, and I was like, I have to talk about this one.
Without giving too many spoilers away, what's the story of the book?
Girl meets boy, and family falls apart.
Okay, all right. Okay, fair enough. And you spoke a bit about the performance there. For me, sometimes audiobooks sound like audiobooks, but sometimes they kind of stray into that kind of strange radio play, audio play territory. So how did did it feel like an audiobook to you, or did it feel more like you were listening to a radio performance?
This particular one felt more like an audiobook to me. I do have a couple others on my list that are full cast that stray more towards radio play, but this one to me at least felt way more like an audiobook.
Okay, and how did you come across it? Was it just one that you heard about, or?
I think it was one of the Audible originals that popped up as a suggestion one day, and I was like, okay, I'll listen to the preview of it. And then I was like, okay, I gotta listen to it all now. And yeah, I'm really glad I did.
Yeah, I'm just out of curiosity, how many audiobooks do you get through a week?
That varies. So I usually have a few books going at one time. I used to be very like, I read one book at a time and then I can move on. And now I'm like, I might have 3 or 4 books going at a time.
Exactly the same. Yeah, weirdly. Same journey.
So I will usually have, so for example, right now I have A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness going as like a physical copy that I'm very slowly making my way through. Lately, I've had an ebook that I will be reading mostly for review purposes, for blogging. And then I have one audiobook I will listen to while cleaning the house or walking the dog. I am a multitasker. I find it very hard for me to just sit still and listen most of the time. And I will reread via audio another book at night before I go to bed.
Okay, that's like quite a lot.
Yeah.
I'm probably reading one graphic novel, listening to one audiobook, and then maybe reading another. When you're like multitasking books, do you like to kind of mix and match genres, or?
Yes, I definitely try and mix up my genres a little bit so I'm not like burnt out on any one particular type of story.
That's good. And how do you select which books that you choose to review? Because I've certainly fallen into the trap of like requesting like a ton of titles from NetGalley and then realizing maybe a third of the way through the book that it's perhaps not for me. And I don't really like giving negative reviews of something. So what's your policy in regards to that?
Yes, that was something I was definitely concerned about when I started doing this. Most of the books that I have been reviewing so far, I have been approached to review them. They were not necessarily ones that I was requesting through a site as of yet. In fact, I don't think I've requested anything on NetGalley yet without a prior understanding that it would be approved.
Oh, cool. So how do you get publishers to approach you? Because myself and Poppy, we've done an interview with our first author as part of our kind of blog tour. How did you get interest from publishers?
So the first one that I was approached about, it was a publicist for a self-published author, and they were trying to up her reviews on Goodreads and everywhere else in anticipation of releasing another book later this year. So that was my very first like experience with that, and then they asked me to do the sequel as well. I had a friend send me a post by the author Mia Hayes looking for people to work on her book tour for Always Yours B, which is another memoir that I was very interested in being able to review that one. And then The Trickster was, again, I think it was a publisher, very, very small indie publisher that was looking to promote a new book. So I haven't had any experience with like the big 5 or anything yet. It's been mostly small independent publishers, self-published authors.
No, but that's good. Kind of just speaking from my own personal experience. The only times I've been approached to be part of a book tour was through my graphic novel reviews that I did for NetGalley. So I get quite often offered reviews for books by Dead Reckoning. They publish a lot of like World War II army stories, and it's interesting how different bloggers approach reviewing stuff as well. So when you're sitting down to kind of like do a review, how does your process work? Do you start off with an idea of what you think about it? Do you kind of more, because when I'm starting writing reviews, I've got a general idea of what I think about, but as I write it, I sometimes change my opinion of what what I actually think about it. So how does your process work?
Yeah, I've kind of had the same thing happen to me, especially as I was writing the first one for The Crowns of Croswald. The first couple of pages, I hadn't read YA in quite a bit prior to that, and I had forgotten just that the style was a little bit different, and at first it felt a little bit silly to be reading it, and so I think I was projecting that onto the book rather than like realizing that was just my own feelings because I hadn't read YA in a while. There was nothing at all wrong with the book. So I think by the time I finally got through it and started writing the review, I was like, okay, I can see the influences because it was heavily influenced by like the world of Harry Potter and a couple of other magical worlds, but that was the one that like stood out the most. I was like, I see where you're going with this, and it grew on me as I had to think about it more.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I think a lot of did either of you guys see that thing on publishing Twitter about how a lot of readers are kind of like turning to YA at the moment because the language usually it's written is a lot. It's more straightforward. It requires like not I said less concentration, but it's just easier to process. And I think especially at the moment, a lot of people their attention spans and concentrations might be a little bit compromised for obvious reasons. Did either of you kind of like see that Twitter thread at all?
I don't know that I saw that explicitly, but yeah, I get what you mean. It's because it doesn't feel like it needs to try and be really sophisticated and, and adult and stuff. Like you find some books or I guess some authors that will
Just basically
use as
trawling
much
through trawling through a thesaurus or whatever to come up with fancy words.
And you're not always going to know that you're going to come across that. You might pick up a book, the synopsis seems great, all seems good, and then you get a bit of the way into it and realise quite how dense and stuff it is. And I guess, people know that with YA because it's pitched at, a certain reading level, I guess, because people are still learning as teens and developing the ability to understand language and everything like that, they can usually guarantee that it's not going to be taxing in that sense.
Yeah. So, just out of kind of interest, what kind of books are your children reading at the moment, Sherry, in terms of like either stuff that's on the curriculum or books that they're talking about? Just if children do talk to their teachers about books they're reading at home. It's been a long time since I've been in school, so I wouldn't be too sure about that. But yeah.
Yes. So our classroom book right now, our chapter book that we're making our way through is Charlotte's Web by E.B. White.
Oh, love it. Yeah.
Absolute classic. And as far as like their personal picks that I see them pulling from like the classroom library and our school library when we do get to go, there's a series called Dog Man that is super popular, specifically for boys right
Dave
now.
Pikey, yeah.
Absolutely. Captain Underpants has withstood the test of time, still very popular. I'm trying to think. Because sometimes the kids will be like, hey, can you have Miss Cameron pull books about such and such topic? And I think the last week before break, our very interesting mix was vampires, cars, Dogman was in there, and I think dogs was the other one. So those are the interests of 8-year-olds right now.
Yeah.
Nice.
Okay, that's good to know. There's especially in the comic book community at the moment, which is kind of like my other strong interest. There's kind of a lot of noise about the death of comic books and comic book stores shutting down. But I just think people still reading comics as just like different types. Then they might not be reading kind of a lot of Spider-Man and Batman single issue collections, but they'll be going to things like Raina Telmagia's Smile series or the Babysitter's Club, or stuff like Dogman and Captain Underpants and stuff like that. So what's the next pick on your list?
All right, my next pick is The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman, which does kind of fall into the YA territory. It is a full cast recording, which I find fun every once in a while. I like to break it up. I think the cast of this particular one is fantastic. Julian Ryan Tutt plays one of the main characters, and he is excellent in this.
I do love myself a bit of Neil Gaiman. Have you read that book, Poppy?
I haven't, no. It's on the list. I do need to make my way through a lot of his stuff. I've read some, but not all of it, but I am keen on that one. And I mean, definitely, if it's got a full cast audio, then that is the way to get me there. So yes, that might be creeping up my list.
So what drew you to that particular book? Was it, again, just something that was recommended by Audible, or how did you come across it?
I had been reading a bunch of Neil Gaiman books prior to that. I was just kind of on a roll, and I was, my next Audible credit came up. So I was like, okay, well, let's see what Neil Gaiman titles are available. And that was one of the ones that I hadn't read yet. And the fact that it had a full cast was a draw for me.
Okay, that's fantastic. So the Graveyard Book's got a great setup. If you want to tell the listeners a little bit about what the Graveyard Book is about.
Yes. So the Graveyard Book is centered around our main character. His name's Bod. And Bod is an orphan who is being raised in this cemetery, this graveyard, by all of these ghosts. And, eventually he comes and he meets a girl that can see him because others have not noticed him until that point. And he forms a friendship with her, and there is a particularly gruesome villain that makes an appearance again in Bod's life. And so he feels like he has to protect this girl while also figuring out what happened to his parents. And it's a lot of fun. And
It
I
is a
love
lot of
anything
fun.
with ghosts in it is my jam too. I like that.
See, like for me, the Graveyard Book is kind of like perfect entry level horror sort of thing, because it's not explicitly. I mean, there are a lot of scary moments in the story, but it's not too gory. It's not especially violent, but there is like this, especially when the villains come in, because it kind of initially it starts off as more of a, I'd say more of a, like a coming of age story of this boy struggling with the decision to stay within the comfort of like where he's been raised, to maybe go out and explore the world a little bit more. And then that's kind of, for me, what was one of the main themes of the story at the start, but then it does go into other kind of weirder, stranger areas as the more horror elements creep in.
Yes, and I think the thing about horror as a genre here is, at least via audio, it's all about the suspense. It's not like the movies where you have jump scares and you're like, oh no, what just happened? It's this creeping sense of dread that sneaks up on you bit by bit as you read. And I love that.
Yeah, horror is really difficult to do well. It's really, really, really difficult to do well, and I think it's kind of a testament to Gaiman's writing that there's kind of enough humor in there. If he writes superb characters, he gives them like fantastic like foibles and catchphrases and stuff like that. Especially if I remember correctly, I think I remember Bod's like foster parents being particularly humorous in kind of certain aspects of the way they treat Bod.
Absolutely.
So, what's your next pick on the list?
My next audiobook pick is another horror one. It's a collection, The Conception of Terror, Tales Inspired by M.R. James, Volume 1. I believe it's another Audible original. It has a fantastic group of narrators. I remember being particularly fond of Pearl Mackey's performance in her. I think it's 4 or 5 different stories that have been adapted for this. So it's Casting the Runes, Lost Hearts, The Treasure of Abbot Thomas, and A View from a Hill. So the one I'm thinking of is The Treasure of Abbot Thomas.
Okay, that's really. Have you read any M.R. James?
That was my first exposure to him, and it was awesome.
Yeah, he's really good. I remember reading one of his horror anthologies over Christmas, and again, it's as you mentioned, Sherry. It's not about necessarily jump scares. It's more about like this creeping sense of dread that he manages to build up through kind of like small. You're not too if it's an innocuous thing, or if it's something a little bit more sinister that's happening in the events of his books.
Mm-hmm.
Have you read any of M.R. James, Poppy?
I actually haven't. I don't usually massively go in for horror stuff, but I don't know, go in for anything that seems interesting. I'm not kind of close it off as a genre, but I don't necessarily seek it out, if that makes sense. What would be the one I should start with?
Sherry, what would you kind of recommend for Poppy to start off with in that particular anthology that you was listening to?
Or just kind of M.R. James stuff?
I would start with M.R. James, and I really liked Casting the Runes. That's the one that drew me in first. So if you can find a copy of Casting the Runes, that would be a good place.
Okay.
Casting the Runes, is that the one that's set on the beach? Or am I thinking of a different one?
No, I think you might be thinking of A View from a Hill, maybe?
Ah, okay. All right, what's the basic setup for Casting a Rune?
So there is an academic who is sent a paper for review, and she doesn't hold back on her thoughts at all, and the writer is less than pleased with that particular situation, and he seeks revenge after receiving his rejection note.
Very good. And so you've kind of mentioned horror a couple of times. Is that kind of like horror, I think that goes in with your interest in maybe historical fiction as well as are those two genres that you like to see mixed together in the stories that you read.
I don't think I've come across too many stories where it's, an even mix of horror and historical fiction. But if you know of any titles, I would love to check that out.
Oh, there is Kostova's book. Let me just carry out a quick Google check. Yeah, Elizabeth Kostova. She does a lot of books around, not strictly speaking, like historical fiction, but there's yeah, that's it, The Historian. So it's kind of
I think I have a copy of that. I haven't read it yet, but I do have a
it's
copy.
really good. So she's basically, it's this epic story of this historian going on a journey to hunt down Dracula, and it's really good. I would class it as like historical fiction slash horror because there's definitely elements of that in the story as well.
Okay.
So yeah, it's really well done. And just going back to the M.R. James, did they have any like sound effects amplify the creeping horror, or was it mostly done through the vocal performances of the narrators?
I believe there were audio effects. I can't think of the name of the specific instrument that you think of that's just the creepy sounds, generic, scary music that just you're like, oh no, something bad's gonna happen. I think a couple of times we hear just ambient noise like footsteps and birds rustling, things like that.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I like when, I know Fed's maybe less keen on this, but I like when audio has those kind of, obviously if they're done well, has those side effects to work in with what's going on and things like that. It's something that I love from one of my favourite children's audiobooks, You're a Bad Man, Mr. Gum. And yeah, I think it's fabulous when it does that and it builds the whole thing, and it is kind of doing that flirting between book and radio play kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it's something we talked about with Rebecca a little bit, really. And so
Mhm.
we interviewed Rebecca Fortain. She's a audiobook editor over at, I think it's called Farshaw Books now, isn't it?
Mhm.
They've changed it.
Between our recording and releasing.
Yeah, between our recording and releasing, they've changed the name of her imprint. She was at Egmont, and she really kind of enjoys it when they push the audiobook format. And the way she explained it, that's something that happens a lot more in children's fiction because like they haven't got people like me saying, well, I don't really like that. So, but horror is another genre, I think, where you can kind of play around with that a little bit more, kind of like wind rustling leaves and the knocking of doors and things of that nature. Don't know where you fall on the spectrum of that. I think probably more towards poppy side in terms of like having more sound effects and musical things in your audiobooks, Sherry.
To a certain point, I think it can always be overdone.
Oh
I
yeah.
am not a fan of when they have even a 30-second piece of music before a chapter feels like ages sometimes. And I'm like, this is totally unnecessary. Just start the chapter, please. I want to keep reading. But I don't
Yeah.
mind other sound effects and stuff or music that plays very quietly under the narration. But anything that disrupts the narration, I tend to avoid.
Yeah, it's definitely all about doing stuff well, isn't it?
Yes.
Whatever we say that we like, there's always going to be ways that there's bad examples of it, and mistimed sound effects, or the sound effects just sound very superimposed onto the thing and go from silence to sound effects and kind
Yeah.
of things. So yeah, definitely bad examples, but it sounds like that one's a good example of the technique.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think another example is The Mermaid of Black Conch, where they kind of just use the music to accent the chapter changes from one narrator to another. And it just
Yeah, it was really
really,
good.
it's really good. If you haven't listened to that, I don't know if it's my favorite audiobook of the year, but it's going to probably take some beating. How many books are we in? We're 3 books in, aren't we?
4.
Is that right? 4. Okay. I did this
Final
last
one.
time we did the top 5. I miscounted how many books we were in. So what's the next book on your list?
Book number 5 is Rosamund Pike's version of Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen.
Oh, okay.
We've changed tone slightly.
Yeah, it's obviously Rosamund Pike's a brilliant actor. I think she's marvelous. Did you choose Sense and Sensibility, or were you more drawn to the Rosamund Pike aspect of it? Kind of, how did you end up choosing to listen to that particular version?
So Rosamund Pike was a bonus. I was looking just for a audio version of Sense and Sensibility. I like reading Jane Austen's works, and I find the audio versions at night they're a comfort read for me, so I can listen to them. I don't have to think too much about it. Nothing bad is ever going to happen in them that won't be resolved by the end of it. Her voice is soothing in these recordings. So that's a nice, like, wind down for me.
Does she do all the different voices, or does she kind of very much stay in like Rosamund Pike cut glass English accent, or does she take a run up at the different characters as well? Because there's a lot of fun characters that you can do in Jane Austen books.
Yes, I think for the most part she sticks to just her natural speaking voice. There's like a slight shift between when she's reading actual dialogue and the rest of the narration, but other than that, I don't think she goes for full-on character voices. It's been a little bit since I've listened to this one.
I was wanting to ask you about that actually as well, because I didn't do a degree in it, but I also have a kind of theatre background and really love that and really love the storytelling on the stage. And I think that one of the reasons I love audiobooks so much is because they combine books with performance, and that really actorly way of doing it. So often actors that do all sorts of work often are really good as narrators, because they've got a lot of the same things that they're trying to pull into it, delivering their lines right. It's all that same sort of thing, and just being amazing performers. Do you think that's kind of something that is also why you like audiobooks?
Yes, and I also think that's why I'm pulled to certain titles more than others. If it's an actor that I am familiar with and enjoy their other work, and I know I enjoy their voice, I am more apt to give that title a go than, say, another one that's been narrated by, it could be somebody brilliant, but maybe that I haven't heard of before.
It's interesting that, isn't it? Because obviously, I guess publishers have got to make that decision of weighing up like stardom, but also like the cost that comes with that, but the pull that just that name can have, as well as obviously the talent that they'll bring to it, and then also lifting up other voices that we've not heard so much from at the moment, and that maybe in some ways are a slightly better fit. I don't know, and stuff like that. It's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It is tricky. You kind of mentioned your background and like studying theatre, and I think casting is such a big part of making sure that a production is successful. What do you think makes a good audiobook narrator?
Oh, goodness. I think one of the most important things, which I did mention with Rosamund Pike, is there should be at least a subtle shift between, okay, this is my dialogue voice and this is what's happening action-wise voice, because sometimes there isn't, and it can get a bit confusing at that point. One of the other things that I really look for in a narrator is, and you would think this one would be like a no-brainer, but like your voice can't be monotone. Nobody wants to listen to that. And I listened to a recording of The Queen's Gambit after watching the Netflix series because I didn't know it was based on a book. The book is brilliant. The narration is atrocious. I had to speed it up to not quite double. I think it was like 1.5 times the normal speed.
Yeah.
I usually listen to most of my audiobooks on 2 times speed. I've got that terrible modern lack of attention sometimes. And I think it's really bad because obviously they've read the book at a particular speed to give their performance nuance and empathy and emotion, and I'm probably missing out on a lot of that due to the speed I listen to audiobooks at. But I can completely understand being trapped with someone who's just speaking in a monotone voice as well, and feeling the need to speed that up as well.
Yes, for the most part, I always try and listen at the normal speed for those reasons, but sometimes you just can't. Your own sanity.
Okay, is that all 5 of your books?
Yes.
That's great. So you're a publishing hopeful, like myself and Poppy. Why the interest to get into the industry, and what draws you to kind of like publishing as an industry? And so it sounds a bit like a job interview now, isn't it? Why do you want to work here? But what draws you to get into an industry that's, as challenging financially and difficult to enter as publishing?
Well, I think my personal problem is I'm drawn to the creative industries as a whole. Like I said, I studied theater in college at that point with the intent to work in theater, like for life as a living. that has obviously not totally happened. I do a little bit of theater work. I work at a couple of local high schools as a technical director, and I help them put up their shows, teach them how to produce a live show.
Nice.
But it comes back to storytelling. Again, theater is just a different way of doing that. I never did any of the acting. I do the backstage. I would stage manage. I would build the sets. I've done hair, wig, and makeup work, everything but the acting. So it felt natural, kind of, to switch over into a different form of storytelling via the written word. And again, it's publishing is the backstage side of that industry.
Yeah.
Whereas the writer is, I guess, the equivalent of your actor.
Yeah. So I'm kind of, just going back to like the theatre side of it, because I volunteered at a theatre for a while as well. So was it mostly like producing or more that on the technical side where you worked in terms of what you kind of majored in at university? Just because I'm interested in how theatre work goes on, just generally just having volunteered at a theatre for a while.
So the particular program that I was a part of, I had a choice between two, one of which would have been design and production, which is the one I probably should have gone for, but did not. It's a story for another time. I did a general Bachelor of Theater Arts, which meant a lot of like theater history classes. You did have to take, a couple of basic acting classes. I took some stage management classes. So stage managers we assist the director. We are the ones running rehearsals. We're the ones calling light cues and sound cues and making sure the crews are doing what they're supposed to be doing backstage. We're kind of running everything in that sense, in the non-creative sense. So I ended up doing a lot of stage managing. That was my main goal. I wanted to stage manage professionally. But I also worked in the scene shop for a couple of years, building the sets and installing them into the different theaters. I enjoyed that work. It kept me a little more active instead of sitting down for 5-hour rehearsals every evening, which can be a bit much at times. And then I kind of fell into the wig work. I didn't anticipate that one, but it's become an oddly useful skill and really annoying when you watch TV and movies. So distracting.
Yeah, I can imagine, maybe you're a little bit distracted by some of the weird wigs in some of the period dramas if you watch any of those as well.
I do.
Yeah. Yeah, so thank you for taking the time to speak to us. It's been really good. It's definitely some of those books I'm going to be checking out.
Yeah, thank you. It's been really good and nice to get to know you and find so many things in common. It was really nice.
Yeah.
Oh, it's been my pleasure.
So just once again, where can people find you on social media?
Yes, I am at Wryreader on both Instagram and Twitter. I promise I will get better at Twitter someday. Today is not that day.
Your Instagram is pretty impressive, kind of having over 2,000 followers on there, and
yeah, wonderful pictures.
Yeah, what really
Thank
nice
you.
work on your Instagram, and kind of you write really well written reviews as well. So if you're looking for another person for like book recommendations and audiobooks or whatever the format may be, please check out Sherry's stuff on social media. I just want to do a really quick shout out to one of my other podcasts that I do. So I've got a podcast called Inconstant Pod, and I recently interviewed mental health activist and comedian Sam White, and yeah, I think it was a really good chat about how we were coping in lockdown and the weird grooming habits we had as teenagers. So please give that a listen as well. Okay, so that's it. Thank you, Sherry, once again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
That's it, guys. Okay, bye.
Bye.